A crucial part to understand urban tourism is the demand side, or in other words, the urban tourist. We will talk about urban tourist profiles, the motivation of tourists, and the experience of urban tourists. First of all, we must be fully aware of the fact that there is no such thing as the tourist, and definitely not as the urban tourist. There are many types of urban tourists differing from each other on a multitude of characteristics. Traditionally, most people think of tourists as the people on this picture here. A couple in their 30s, two kids, a boy, a girl. They're all white, probably living in suburbs. They're quite rich and they're always smiling. They're middle class. Many tourist promotions picture this archetype of tourists. However, we must be honest, the world is far more complex than just this one type of tourist. A first example of a different type of tourists are the seniors. Although lately they have become more and more apparent within tourism brochures or tourism billboards or tourism flyers or other types of tourism promotion, they still are a highly underestimated group of tourists. A study conducted by the research firm Xerfi Research showed that there are no offers especially dedicated to this clientele all over Europe, so there's still a huge potential there. Even more atypical is the type of tourist illustrated on this slide. Young people who are traveling with their parents. 20 years ago, this was totally out of the question. The sooner you got to travel on your own without your parents, the better. Now, however, many youngsters keep on traveling with their parents until their mid-20s. I myself did a small survey amongst 200 students of 20 to 23 years old, and all of them had traveled with their parents the past year. This phenomenon can be explained by two things. Firstly, because young people like traveling with their parents because it is cheap, and so they can travel to expensive destinations. And secondly, more importantly probably, is a deeper explanation. It is about the relationship between children and parents that has evolved. It has become less hierarchical, so it is more normal to travel together than it used to be. Another type of niche tourism is this one. Verrereizenmetkinderen.nl is a tour operator focusing on traveling to faraway destinations with children, which is really a small target group of the market. Bizcation is another form of niche tourism. Bizcation is the trend where business travelers combine their business trips with a real holiday, a real vacation. That's where the word bizcation comes from the word business and vacation. A great example of a niche type of tourist is this one. It is a tour operator who organizes group holidays with and for people who have just lost their husband or wife. And the program of the trip is specially developed for this target group, so it is totally tailor-made. A great example of a specific target group is shown on this slide. It is about tours that focus on people who like to sleep in. And in fact, when you think of it, it is a great idea, since many people on holiday like to sleep in because they cannot do so when they are at home and have to get up to go to work or school. And when they're on holiday, they want to stay up late, they want to sleep in, and now this organization thought, well, that's a good idea. Let's focus on travel tours for late sleepers. The most extreme example that I have ever found on target groups or niche tourists is this one. It is about a hotel in the USA where pregnant women can go to and stay for a few months until the baby is born. And these women pay over $30,000 to do so. And why are they doing that? It's because when the baby is born in the US, it is by constitution a citizen of the US. And there are quite a few people who are keen on having their children becoming US citizens and who want to pay over $30,000 for their stay. All the previous slides illustrate that the tourist does not exist. On the contrary, the last few years there has been a tendency towards what Chris Anderson calls the long tail, which is illustrated by this slide. By this concept, he means that although there still are a few general groups on which companies can focus in their marketing, here is the example of the white suburban couple with 2 kids, one of the first slides we saw. Now, although these general groups are still there, most of the market is now scattered into thousands and thousands of niches. Anderson's reasoning is that these niches are of major interest for the economy because of the fact that people from the niche are willing to pay a lot more for products and services that are tailor-made and that meet their expectations entirely, instead of paying for general products and services that target John and Jane Doe, the average man or woman in the middle of the market. For tourism, the concept of the long tail is of major importance, especially for urban tourism, because it is within urban tourism that all kinds of niche tourisms are originated. And this makes sense because the urban tourist is so diverse and the urban destination is so complex and varied that the odds of matching special supply with special demands are higher than in any other type of tourism. The main explanation for the existence of a long tail of urban tourist types has to do with the multitude of determinants of tourism demand, as is shown on this slide. Oizal distinguished 3 types of determinants: economic determinants, such as disposable income and cost of living; socio-psychological determinants, such as demographic factors and travel preferences and travel experiences; and thirdly, exogenous determinants like political or economic trends. All these factors shape the demand side, and it is not difficult to understand that there are many types of urban tourists since there are so many determinants, and hence the combination of determinants is endless. Despite of the long tail and the existence of thousands and thousands of urban tourist niches, there have been quite a number of attempts to classify urban tourists into different tourist types. We will show just a few of them in this second chapter. There are basically 6 ways of segmenting tourists: geographical, such as regional versus national tourists; demographical, such as based on gender, age, or family life cycle; psychographic, which means a segmentation based on values, lifestyle, or social class; fourthly, the traveling style, which is based on characteristics such as the used accommodation or the travel party composition; fifthly, the tourism products that are experienced and the activities that are undertaken; and finally, the usage. This table gives you some illustrating examples of each segmentation method. The next slides illustrate 1 or 2 models that are based on each method, as is mentioned in this table, except for the geographic method because this speaks for itself. A typical example of a demographic way of segmenting tourists is this one by Page and Connell, where there are 8 stages of family life cycle defined, each of them having own characteristics and, importantly, a particular way of tourism behavior. There is also an example of a classification based on the family life cycle within the article that has been provided, but it differs from this one because it has 9 stages instead of here 8 stages. well, it doesn't really matter, because the point is that people travel differently when they are in a different life stage. The Gallup classification model, which is the one on top of the slide, is a typical psychographic segmentation model, where there are 5 types of tourists distinguished, each of them with a range of characteristics that are partially demographic, like the income and education, and partially have to do with norms and values. An even clearer psychographic typology is the one of Plog, who distinguishes 2 types at the extreme end of a continuum: the allocentric tourist, who is adventurous, who enjoys traveling, and a psychocentric tourist, who prefer places similar to their home environment. The mid-centrics is the 3rd type, and they are somewhat in the middle. This rather complex model is interesting for the fact that the pre-travel experience and commitment and the on-site travel style are the main dimensions that are used to build up a tourist typology. The final tourist classifications involve a lot of types. That's not the point here. The most important point is that pre-travel experience and commitment and on-site style are the basic of a tourist typology. Product and activities can also be used as the basis for a tourist typology, and in fact there are many classifications. This is just one, designed by Page and exclusively related to urban tourists. Page distinguishes several types of tourists who visit friends and relatives, who come to this destination for business traveling, conference and exhibition visitors, and so on and so forth. A classification for cultural tourists, often used within an urban tourism context, is the one of McKercher, which is shown on this slide. McKercher distinguishes 2 main dimensions for cultural tourists: the centrality of the destination choice, which is here on the x-axis, which means how important is culture in the total of reasons that are at play in the complex process of destination choice. And secondly, the experience sought, which is the y-axis, and this expresses how shallow or deep tourists want a cultural experience. And these 2 dimensions combined lead to 5 types of tourists. Of course, it is also possible to combine several dimensions and several segmentation methods. This slide illustrates a 15 types classification of Fu and others, and they use indeed several dimensions: psychographic, traveling style, products and activities, and usage. And in fact, most typologies combine a variety of characteristics to define tourist types. It is not easy to classify urban tourists because, first of all, the tourist city is multifunctional in nature. Secondly, there are different groups of users within any tourist city. Thirdly, visitors make use of tourist resources in many ways. And fourthly, the nature of visits by urban tourists is inherently multi-motivational. Now, because of the difficulty to classify urban tourists, most scholars and practitioners now agree that the most important question one has to find out about the urban tourist types is: why do tourists visit the urban destination? A study of the WTO and the European Travel Commission in 2005 revealed a number of reasons why tourists made a city trip, ranging from history and culture, over visiting friends and relatives, to easy to get there, or sports. And there are indeed a wide range of reasons why people visit cities. The main pull factors for city trips are described by Janssen Verbeek and Livois in the study of 1999. They distinguish 4 general pull factors. A city is unique and interesting. It has major cultural attractions and sightseeing. There is entertainment, and there's good food and accommodation. Each of these pull factors is then further elaborated in specific pull factors, as you can see on this slide. Another way of illustrating the fact that all types of resources can be attractive to several groups is this slide. It also suggests a regional or spatial clustering of resources into a city type, which is comparable to the concept of the urban tourism attraction system that we have defined in previous class. Indeed, the attractivity of cities, or the so-called pull factors, are diverse, and they explain to a certain extent urban tourism demand. However, more importantly, we should take a look at the tourist himself, and we must ask ourselves the question, what is the tourist looking for when traveling? A basic model that explains tourist needs is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow distinguished 5 types of needs which also have a hierarchy. The basic needs are at the bottom of the pyramid, and the more complex needs are at the top. And these more complex, can only be fulfilled when the lower needs are fulfilled. Although not developed for the purpose of tourism, Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been translated into a tourism context, which is illustrated on this slide. The physiological needs within a tourism context are, for instance, dining establishments, hotels, and public toilet facilities. Security needs are, for instance, related to guides on streets, information centers, and signage. The need of belonging is reflected in things like the friendliness of the community, social activities, or romantic activities. The needs related to self-esteem, or which is the need to feel special and unique, can be met, for instance, in the opportunity to learn or to participate at unique events that are not found elsewhere. And the highest need, the one of self-actualization, or the need to feel you are the best person you can be, this can be met in things like volunteering in projects with a worthy cause. Now, Philip Pearce conducted several studies on tourist motivations, and he found that there are about 14 motivations for tourists to travel: novelty, escape or relax, strengthening relationships, autonomy, nature, self-development by the involvement with hosts or the site, personal development, stimulation, relationships and security, self-actualization, isolation, nostalgia, romance, and recognition. Now, interestingly, he found that the core motives, that are the ones that are very important to explain tourists and their behavior, are first of all novelty, secondly escape or relax, and thirdly relationship. The other 11 motives can still be important, but are, all in all, of less importance than those major 3. Now, interestingly, this research was cross-cultural, which means that the 3 basic motivations, novelty, escape, relax, and relationship, are not just typical for Western tourists. Kuoni, one of the biggest tour operators in the world, also studied the motivations of their clients. And they served about 15,000 tourists traveling with Kuoni. Interestingly is that they found the same 3 basic motivations as Philip Pearce: relax, discover, which is the same as Pearce's novelty, and being together. Pearce talked about relationship. And finally, also the Flemish Tourist Board studied the travel motivations of hundreds of international tourists in Flanders. And once again, the 3 main motivations were found. They put them on 2 axes. The x-axis, which is this one, representing the importance of the self versus the importance of the other. And the y-axis, this one, representing the search for novelty versus safety and balance. They summarized the three types of tourists as dare shared tourists, which refers to their main motivation. Care tourists want to relax together in a well-known and secure environments. Shared tourists want to enjoy and have fun together with other people. And their tourists want to experience new exclusive things. However, one must note that motivations can vary during life and even during one travel trip. A care tourist might be looking for some dare moments and might as well enjoy time to share with his family. In other words, everyone has his care, dare, share moments and moods, but the driving force to travel can be more care, more dare, or more share, depending on the personality of the traveler. This is also true for the urban tourist. There are care, dare, and share urban tourists who might be looking for the same things but also have distinguished tastes, preferences, and expectations. When we talk about expectations, we must take into account that the tourist of today in general and the contemporary urban tourist in particular has higher expectations than several years ago. In this chapter we will show that tourists are more and more looking for meaningful experiences, experiences that transform their lives. And this is especially true for urban tourists, where all kinds of new urban tourism products and services are appearing as an effort to try to meet the new urban tourist demands. When we talk about experiences, we must realize that this concept holds three levels, as is shown on this slide, which is unfortunately in Dutch. A basic experience, which is the first level, a memorable experience, which is the second level, and a transforming experience, which is the third level. And you can see some similarities here with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Importantly, both the individual characteristics such as prior experiences, involvement, knowledge, values, moods and motivations, and the social context such as the group, communities and other visitors shape the individual's experience. In the next slides we will show some examples of what a meaningful transforming experience might be like, and you can find some of these and some others at my boards on my Pinterest account. Transforming meaningful experiences are personally relevant experiences. This means that people are looking for things they find interesting, things they are passionate about. These pictures illustrate two very specific type of interests or passions. The first one is a walking tour in Munich that shows Hitler's Munich, the Munich of Hitler. It's called the Third Reich Tour. And the second one on the right shows communism tours in Krakow. Now you must realize that a few years ago it was unthinkable that this type of experiences would be offered to tourists because of ethical reasons. Nowadays there are many types of tours that are similar to these themes. Also, ugliness is being sold as a tourism product, trying to meet the rising demand for personally relevant experiences. This slide shows just two examples. On top you can find the banner of the Charleroi Adventure City Safari website. The Charleroi Adventure City Safari is a tour through Charleroi offered by two young artists. Now you have to know that Charleroi was elected as the ugliest city in the world by the readers of the Dutch newspaper Volkskrant in 2009. Now these two artists thought we can do something with that because ugliness can be interesting as well, so they started their own tours, which they called, ironically, a city safari. The picture below is an excerpt from the website politicaltours.com, which is a company that sells tours to politically interesting regions. The picture is taken in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where you can visit all the places that were relevant in the battle between Catholics and Protestants. A last example of personally relevant experiences is street art. On the slide on top you can find examples of Christchurch in New Zealand on the left, where an artist started the trend of urban knitting, and of Brussels on the right, where the street artist Bonhomme creates beautiful wall drawings. Now, a few years ago street art was not a tourist item. Whatever city I went to, there was nothing to find on street art in tourist guides and so on. Nowadays, however, many tourism suppliers are offering tours or information on street art. A good example is the Adidas app, which is the picture on the bottom of this slide. This app shows all the street art places in Berlin. Another way to enhance the tourist experience next to personally relevant experiences is to create exclusivity. This means that suppliers are giving tourists the feeling that no one else has the same experience, that the tourists are the only ones who experience the product or service. A particular way to increase exclusivity is the trend of experimental travel, which comes down to the fact that one travels in totally different ways beyond the traditional concept of travel. Lonely Planet, for instance, has a guide to experimental travel with suggestions and tips and tricks for special ways of traveling, such as always take the first street left and the second street on the right. Another example is the Get Lost app, an app that guides visitors in their experience of the city of Rotterdam by getting lost. A great example of an exclusive experience is illustrated by this picture. It is a part of Teufelsberg in Berlin. Teufelsberg is the highest hill in Berlin, about 60 meters high. It is a man-made hill. It is in fact a hill that consists of all the scrap that resulted from the destructions of the Second World War. The scrap hill was covered with soil, trees started to grow, and on top of the hill a radio station was built by the Western Allies during the Cold War. The location of the radio station was perfect since it was the highest point of Berlin and situated near the border of East Germany. And when the Cold War ended, the radio station lost its function. It got abandoned after a few years and turned into a deteriorating place where no one was allowed to. However, Berliners rediscovered this place. They started to organize illegal rave parties and barbecues, and now it is an underground tourist attraction. It is officially illegal to be there because it is a dangerous place, with holes in the floor and walls that might collapse, and it is also surrounded by a double fence. However, there's always one small hole in the fence. If the government closes a hole, the next day there's one in another place. This means you have to look for the entrance, but once you've found it, you can enter the premises. Interestingly, there are always a number of tourists exploring the area. But because it is illegal and not mentioned by any guidebook, as a tourist you get the feeling of a truly exclusive experience. Of course, there are also many legal exclusive experiences. A great example is this wet food restaurant in the Philippines. Or when it comes to accommodation, there are a lot of examples that illustrate the trend of exclusivity. Quite well-known examples on this slide are sleeping in a tram, like here, in a sewage pipe, this one, in a plane that stays on the ground and is not flying, in a silver mine in Sweden, or brilliant idea, camping on top of a high-rise building in the center of London. Another simple but great example of exclusive accommodation is camping in the parks of New York City, which is the picture on the left, or the urban camping on the docks of Antwerp during the summer of Antwerp in 2010, which is the picture on the right. Or another great example of exclusive accommodation is this one, a tent that is basically a transparent bubble. Now this tent is redefining the concept of room with a view. A third way of creating meaningful experiences is offering multisensorial experiences, where you are not only focusing on listening and seeing, but also on the other senses, smelling, touching, tasting. A good example of multisensorial experience is Max Brenner's Chocolate Culture. It is a chocolate concept store originated in Australia and now spread out in many cities all over the world. You can buy traditional chocolate products there, but you can also eat there. And every meal on the menu has chocolate in it. The most extreme chocolate meal you find is the chocolate pizza, with toppings of banana and marshmallows. It is a great example of engaging several senses in the customer experience. Two more examples on the five senses. The picture on top is about a city tour where you are blindfolded, and by doing this, the suppliers want people to engage other senses in their city experience. The picture on the bottom is an example of Paris where two ladies started new guided tours based on the concept of a cooking workshop. But as a participant of this cooking workshop, you also do the preparing shopping. So by buying goods in local stores and eating real Paris food, it is believed that visitors experience Paris in another, more authentic and more meaningful way. The last example of Succulent Paris is also an example of the trend where tourists do not only listen to guides or read their guidebooks, but they are actually involved in all kind of tourist and local activities. Doing stuff has indeed become more important than just telling stuff. And recently there have been a number of initiatives in foreign but also in Belgian cities that have to do with experiencing the city by sports. The picture on the left is an example of what people call sight jogging. It is jogging with a guide in a city, and this picture is taken in Lier, where you can go sight jogging. On the right is an example of urban golf, where you can play golf and even participate at golf tournaments, and by doing so you experience the city in an active way. And city games are another way of actively involving visitors to experience the city. This example is from Flanders, where La Mosca builds city games, and it is actually quite successful at it. A final example of actively experiencing the destination is the concept of voluntourism, which is the combination of volunteering and tourism. It is not very well known in Belgium yet, but in Holland there are thousands and thousands of people who try to give meaning to their holiday by helping local non-profit organizations when they are traveling. Acting local and looking for authenticity is another way of lifting a tourist experience up to the next level of meaningful, transforming experiences. Visiting the backstage of a destination, going off the beaten track and behind the traditional tourist scene of a city, is a way to get to know the locals, the real city, the city as it is. The following examples illustrate this tourist quest for locality and authenticity. A great example of going behind the scenes of a tourist attraction, which you can take literally here, is the one where guided tours behind the scenes of Brussels Airport take you to places that you'd never come to as a visitor of Brussels Airport. You learn how airports are organized, you visit places that you normally are not allowed to go to. Now, note that this is also an example of exclusivity. Another type of tours that take tourists behind the scenes of a destination and into the real and authentic backstage are the ones that are offered by the Greeters network. Greeters are local people that guide visitors around to off-the-beaten-track places that they believe are important, interesting for tourists. The Greeters network originated in New York, but can now be found in many other cities, even in Brussels and even at the Belgian coast. Spotted by Locals is another example of off-the-beaten-track tourism. It is a community of bloggers that live in cities and blog about local places that are worth visiting for tourists. They give loads of tips and tricks for tourists to discover the real, authentic city. and as a tourist you can also feed back on their suggestions, which is a kind of quality guarantee. A final example of how local experiences are enhanced by tours is the platform Gitsi. On this platform, all kinds of locals offer activities that are bookable for tourists. As a visitor, you can book this activity very easily. Now, Gitsi is at the moment active in the major cities such as Amsterdam, London, Berlin and New York City. And it is indeed a typical urban tourism innovation, trying to meet the demand of urban tourists for local authentic experiences. A tremendous trend in tourism is staying overnight at homes of local people. Especially in urban destinations, this trend is huge. Couchsurfing, for instance, exists since several years. It is a network of people who offer their couch to visitors who can stay overnight in the homes of local residents for free. Now, if you don't like unfamiliar people staying at your house, you can also offer visitors to go for a walk or have a drink, or you can show the city you live in and talk about the city you live in. Airbnb and Wimdu basically do the same as Couchsurfing. They are networks of local people offering a place to stay at their homes. However, the big difference with Couchsurfing is that as a tourist you pay for your accommodation when you book it at Airbnb or Wimdu. Now, both Airbnb and Wimdu are very successful. Airbnb, for instance, had over 5 million bookings since their origin in September 2008. Most of the accommodation that is offered by these platforms is located in cities, making this a major urban tourism phenomenon. A variation of Couchsurfing, Airbnb and Wimdu is the initiative Camp in My Garden. The concept is simple. Private gardens are offered to tourists as micro campsites. There are several locals in Flanders who are part of this network, and although it is not an exclusively urban tourism phenomenon, it has major potential for urban tourism. A third way of acting local, next to tours and activities that go off the beaten track and staying overnight with locals, is dining with locals. Living room restaurants are a niche trend in urban destinations. This slide is an excerpt from an article from the newspaper De Standaard, where 3 living room restaurant owners were interviewed. Now, a living room restaurant is nothing more than local people who are passionate about cooking and from time to time serve food to visitors, however mostly still local people. This example, Comme Chez Moi, has the same concept as living room restaurants, but they focus on non-local people. It is a network of local residents who want to cook for a small party of foreigners, visitors, tourists, expats, and so on. To conclude, if we want to understand the contemporary urban tourist, we must know that he is beyond the quest for experience. He is now looking for meaningful activities, attractions, amenities, access, etc. We have indeed entered the stage of the meaning economy, which is the next step beyond the experience economy. The model on this slide is based on the one on the experience economy by Pine and Gilmore. Pine and Gilmore illustrate the evolution of the economy towards an experience economy by the product, coffee. Now, we don't use the product coffee here, we use chocolate instead because it is more local, and we talk about the chocolate progression of the economy. The first stage of the economy is the one where goods are produced. Now, talking about chocolate, the good is in this case cacao beans. In the next phase of the economy, products are being made. Think chocolate bars, chocolate bonbons, pralines, etc. The third phase is all about services and quality of a service. We can think in our example of chocolate of the flagship stores of chocolate brands such as the Côte d'Or flagship store at the Zavel in Brussels. The fourth phase is the one where urban tourism assets and destinations have to offer experiences. This is the fourth phase. Good examples are the chocolate train in Switzerland and the chocolate pizza at Max Brenner's in New York City. Finally, the meaning economy, which is the fifth phase, meaning. It is all about creating added value by giving meaning to your experiences. Or in other words, by offering experiences that transform the tourists' lives. We can think of chocolate workshops where you actually learn how to make chocolate bars or bonbons. And the learning of something out of the ordinary is a meaningful activity that has changed the way we as a tourist are. Now this is what tourism nowadays all is about, and especially urban tourism. It is about changing people by creating added value through meaningful experiences.